other. Um, just to pick up on a comment that you made, Barbara, you mentioned about the first right sale in the digital environment. I read recently that there's a group in France have made a proposal for a digital first right sale. I don't know, Andrew, if you've heard of this and if you've got any thoughts about it going forward. No. Okay. I picked it up on the airwaves, but it was quite an interesting point, I felt, because I know there is a great deal of reticence on the part of the publishers, and particularly within the trade, about the electronic book rights in libraries. Some of the major trade publishers I know have withdrawn from allowing libraries to lend their digital books. Barbara, do you have any comments on that?
Well, the 6 big publishers, English language publishers, have basically refused to sell their books into libraries for lending. This is e-books, and this is a matter of major concern, because in effect this is saying that libraries are not going to, I'm talking public libraries here, are not going to have a free choice of what they can buy in future for lending, because you have to think what's the future going to be like with books. Everyone thought hardback was going to die, but in fact the hardback is going to probably survive as a niche item, for publishing launches and things like that, and collector's items. And it's probably the paperback that will go, as Kindle rules the world, and if not Kindle, Kobo or one other. So this will mean that if this becomes the trend, and if something isn't sorted out, libraries' future, and a public library's future as a lending agency to people who can't afford to buy materials, and in fact nobody can afford to buy everything, is very much threatened. And that, I think, will have a far deeper effect on libraries and their place in the community and their place in society than any amount of branch closures will have.
Thank you. So, Andrew and then Richard.
I think the whole issue of e-books is a fascinating one in just highlighting the point I was making about the differences and boundaries around different markets, and particularly boundaries around what educational establishments, what libraries and others do in complementary ways to what publishers themselves do. When we had the debate in the UK about the public lending right and how that might apply to e-books, the government was very keen to put in place legislation for PLR to extend potentially to e-book lending and also to audiobook lending. So we have legislation. Do we have any money? No, we don't. We have a reduction on public lending right. We have a threat to move the office from a good functioning self-centred office to part of another government department, and we have no proposals on the table to remunerate authors through the PLR for e-book lending. So there is understandably a degree of nervousness about how those arrangements will complement what publishers are doing themselves in providing for e-book lending online, and how the libraries can do what they've always been so good at in the past, which is add value rather than actually substituting it.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I would just say the position with regards to trade publishers and e-book lending is slightly more nuanced than Dan was given. Certainly in the UK, publishers, the bigger ones and some of the medium-sized and smaller ones, have a variety of different approaches, different licensing arrangements, including things like Bloomsbury's Public Library Online. The point is, though, that, of course, if you can sit on your sofa with your Kindle and either decide to buy a book from Amazon, albeit at a whatever price, £4 let's say, or get that same book for free from your local library by pressing just slightly different buttons, you will do the latter. And the undermining of the market for books is the huge concern for publishers, and that's why there's reticence about jumping straight to an e-lending model. But I should say that we and the Society of Chief Librarians and CILIP and the Reading Agency and others in the library community meet regularly to discuss this. We even sit around a table with the sainted Ed Vaizey, and he is going to bring forward a sort of Finch-like review in the autumn to look at the whole area. But unfortunately it isn't as simple as just saying, hey, let's allow public libraries to do e-lending. There's far more complexity to it.
Thank you. Another question I had was on the Copyright Hub that's being proposed within the UK. I have also read on that there may be some reticence within Europe, that's seeing it as a UK initiative, not a European initiative, and that might limit its use.
Well, I hadn't read that. It depends, who in Europe. I mean, 'cause certainly amongst the stakeholders around the table in the UK are people like the Link Content Coalition and the European Publishers Council, who bring Europe to the table, if you like, and I think certainly all of our members have strong European interests, the music industry too. So I think, there might well be people in certain bits of certain countries in Europe who, have got a bit of a not invented here syndrome about it, and I think it was very strong in all of Hooper's analysis that unless this was international, it would sort of be pointless. But I think it will be international, because when you have companies, like Pearson, like Bertelsmann, who have got very strong operations in lots of different territories, who are investing in the hub, they're not going to want it to be a UK silo. So I think it will line out.
Yeah, I think it was from the user groups particularly, rather than the content providers.
Right. Well, I think their concern could be allayed, because it would be unthinkable that, as I say, big corporations with international interests who are investing in this would to say, oh, well, it's only for UK rights. Yeah,
no, I agree. Did you have any questions for each other? I saw you scribbling some notes. Did you?
I did, if I may.
Please.
I'd like to just ask Barbara how, going back to the list of principles, and I think it was 9 or 10, the proposal that educational institutions should be allowed to make copies of a work for teaching purposes. I mean, a laudable aim, of course, but I don't understand how that does not conflict with the normal exploitation of a work.
I think in all of this you have to see it in the context of existing or future exceptions and limitations. Yes, I mean, publishers sell into the education market, big market, but on the other hand, I think you know full well students are not going to buy every book. They don't. They make copies, or they need copies made for them of a part of the work, but sometimes a whole work in terms of what may go onto a virtual learning environment. Again, all these things, if you like, would need, because it's digital, would need to be controlled through technological measures to ensure that, if you like, something that is acceptable is arrived at. And don't forget, these principles are just broad principles. If you like, the devil's in the detail with all of them.
Andrew.
One area that I find very interesting is this suggestion about extending the exception for researchers to cover films and sound recordings, because a question that was asked by some rights holders is, how does a non-commercial researcher use a sound recording or a film differently from a private individual? Is there really a different way in terms of what they actually listen to or what they hear, a difference? And if there isn't, how do we challenge, if there is, how do we challenge the government to say that non-commercial researchers should somehow have some sort of privileged access to these things over those who privately access, for whom commercial rules should apply?
Are there any other comments from the floor? All right, well, as it's getting on for 12 o'clock, if I could just summarise some three speakers. I think Andrew sort of reiterated his comment that I picked up earlier about not tearing up the rule book, and so advocated for an evolutionary approach, but also questioned if we're looking at developing and growing creativity and intellectual property rights for the benefit. The question is the growth for whom, by whom, and I think that's an interesting point to bring up. Richard then came up with sort of saying, well, within Britain, are the government doing good things or are they doing bad things? And I think I'm right in summarising that he said, in the main, they're on the right track. And sort of incrementally, they are developing appropriate procedures. They are doing some of the evidence-based approach that Andrew mentioned, but maybe some not, making some assumptions. But we seem to be going in the right direction. And I think Barbara nicely sort of finished it by saying, where is the future? Is it with the librarians and the publishers and the creative developers? Or actually are we abdicating it to Google and they called it GAFA in the first session, which I always thought was a type of tape, but the Google, Amazon, Apple and Facebook environment. And I think that's something that as publishers we need to take into consideration. So I'd like to thank again my three speakers, if you'd like to join me.